tribe. I am so excited that we're catching up with Shona Macpherson. We last spoke with Shona at the beginning of July in 2019, where she shared more about taking on new challenges at 40 and her preparation for through hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, SOBO, so southbound, heading from Canada down to Mexico. Shona is now back in Scotland. Shona, how are you doing? Massive congratulations on completing the Pacific Crest Trail. Absolutely phenomenal. How are you feeling being back?
Yeah, really happy to be home. Yeah, it's good to see people again and to be back in the Highlands. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, it's, obviously we're going to be talking about your whole experience, the highs, the lows, the ups and the downs. But for people who maybe haven't listened to the first episode, would you just like to just give everyone a little bit more background about who you are, what you do, where you're based, all of that good stuff?
I am based in Inverness in the Highlands of Scotland, and I work here as a life coach and as a counsellor. And I also do treks for wellbeing, working with a mountain guide, just for women in the Cairngorms near where I live.
Let's talk about the Pacific Crest Trail. So you headed over. When did you start? What was it like in sort of flying over to America? And suddenly it's like, when your dream started to become a massive reality.
It was strange and surreal, I suppose, after quite a lot of planning to actually be flying out to Seattle. And I stayed with a friend of a friend for a few days in Seattle. And it was really nice to be met by somebody who I didn't know, but kind of, I felt like I knew. She was very kind. She helped me sort out my food resupply boxes, and we together posted some on, and then she was going to send more on to me later on the trail. So it was nerve-wracking, but kind of maybe becoming more real at that stage. And then from there, so I had a few days there. I think I maybe had 3 days, maybe in Seattle, doing last minute things like that. And then I got a train to a place called Bellingham, and I stayed with a volunteer, lovely man who was a trail angel there. Just got there late one night, and the next morning he took me and 3 other women that were also staying there to the trailhead, and that was then where it all kind of began, and that was on the 4th of July. So I left on the 1st of July, flew out, and then sort of got to the start of the trail on the afternoon of the 4th of July.
Oh my goodness. Did you have a lot to do in those 3 days? Was that quite sort of overwhelming, because you were doing sort of resupply boxes and everything else? Like, how easy was that to do once you were on the ground over there?
Yeah, I think just because I was staying with this lovely lady who dedicated her time to driving me around, it was fairly easy. We went to, I think it was Walmart, and I kind of had a bit of a plan of what I was already going to get, and a plan of what towns I was sending food to and all the addresses. And I had already sent arranged for the boxes to be in her house. So it wasn't easy, but it wasn't terrible either. But yeah, it definitely took the time that I'd set aside. I didn't have much time to play with. And the American postal system was a little bit complicated. There was you had to send by some delivery company and some by the other, depending on where you were sending it to. So without her help, I think I'd have found that a lot more difficult. But because of her help, it was pretty smooth sailing, I guess. Yeah.
Do you remember back to the first day, to the 4th of July? Like, were there fireworks going off in the evening for the first night of camping?
If there were, I didn't hear them. So we started, myself and then these other 3 lovely ladies started. It's a bit strange if you're southbounding the PCT. You don't actually start at the monument. You have to walk from a trailhead 30 miles north to the start. So I only got half there. I didn't even get to the monument on the first day. Just did 15 miles, I think it was, on the first day. I don't think we started till sort of 2:30 in the afternoon or something. So it was. I remember it was cold. I thought I was going to wear shorts, and I had to change into my leggings. And I remember just walking and feeling a bit trippy, like, oh, this is it. I am actually starting, and not quite feeling like I was really there, and also being quite focused on wanting to make 15 miles in the first day, which is pretty silly, really. And I remember I was mostly walking with this other lovely lady called U.S.A, and then we made the 15 miles and camped out in this beautiful meadow. And it was cold. I remember eating my dinner and then just getting straight into my tent. And no fireworks, but a lot of people, unfortunately. That was not what I'd expected. It was really, really busy. And the main reason for that was I was southbounding, and not that many people do it still, although there was significantly more, I think, than previous years. But most people start at the Mexican border and go northbound. But they had a really difficult year for northbounding. So they'd started in the spring, but there had been really bad snow. So a lot of people got as far as the Sierra Mountains and then decided to do what's called a flip. So they got transport then up to where I was. And they were also then going south. So they had quite complicated routes. But for that reason, there were a lot of us on trail, either like me going north to the monument, or they'd tag the monument, they were coming back. So we were passing each other on trail. So it was really busy, which I'd not expect.
Yeah. What was it like seeing the monument? Like, because that must have been like just momentous. Like I know it's momentous finishing it, but also seeing the start. Like it's the actual start of this dream that you've had for a long time, and you've put a huge amount of time and effort into the planning and preparation to get to that point, and then you're there, you're touching it. Like, I mean,
yeah, it was cool. It was literally cool. Remember, it was raining and really cold, and it took 2 days to get there. So it was funny. Like I had started, but I hadn't started, if that makes sense, because actually tagging the monument was the beginning of the 2,650 miles of the actual trail. But I guess it was a relief to think, okay, I am now at the start. I've done all the stuff I can do. Now I've just got to go all the way south for a long time. And also it was nice because it was in a really remote area. There was nothing there apart from the monument. And there was sort of a strip of ground that was sort of reasonably well kept. And then on either side, it was really overgrown. So it was just really simple. Whereas, as I'll get to later, when I got to the Mexican border, it was a very different situation, of a big wall being near it. But yeah, we'll probably get to that later.
Yeah. So tell us about the first sort of days, the first sort of week. Like how easy was it getting into your routines, or sleeping out there in the wilderness? What was that like?
I think I was a bit twitchy at the start. If I can remember back, it feels like I was quite nervous. I was really trying to make miles quite quickly. I think within a couple of days I was going for 20-mile days, and I was really focused on that and being worried that I was going to not be fast enough. I remember that being partly there for me. And I remember it being really wet and cold, and that being a big worry for me as well. But also, like you said, within the range of a week, I'd say that would probably be in the first 3 or 4 days. But by the time I'd tagged the border and had walked back to Hearts Pass where I'd started and kept going, I began to then just get more of a sense of spaciousness and more of a belief that, oh yeah, here I am. This is going to become my new normal. I don't think sleeping was ever a big problem. I think it's at that stage anyway. I slept well, and I just then began, I guess, to find more of a groove and a rhythm and a way of just like knowing where things are in my pack and sort of managing that better and finding a routine. But I think it probably did take about a week just to begin to get that groove.
You talked about sort of pushing 20-mile days pretty quickly. Where was that pressure coming from? Was that like, yeah, sorry, I'll let you answer the question.
Oh yeah, sure. So that was coming from within me, and my absorption of things that I had read that said if you were southbounding the PCT, there is more of a time pressure to get your miles quickly so that you're not hitting the High Sierra, the John Muir Trail when the snows start. So there's a kind of a notional guideline. I can't quite get the date in my head. I've got the worst memory, but I think it's something like the the 16th of October, you should be through the High Sierras, something sort of date like that. So I had in my head, right, okay, I need to quite quickly getting to be doing 20-mile-ish days and to be able to sustain that. And I just wasn't quite sure what I was capable of. So there was that sort of nervousness of, right, come on, don't be messing around. Don't get sort of sucked into going into towns too much and things like that. And then later on, I realised I was fit enough and I could have trusted myself sooner. But I think at the first, I wasn't quite sure what I was capable of because I'd never done anything like that before. So pressure I was putting on myself.
When did you start realising like how capable that you were? Like when did you start sort of thinking, hold on, I'm doing this. I'm walking these big miles, these big distances and carrying everything that you need on your back?
To be honest, I don't know. I can't remember a day where I kind of went from one to the other. It was much more of a gradual thing. So I genuinely don't know. But I suppose, so the first 500 miles-ish is Washington State. So maybe it took me all of Washington. I remember kind of being in Oregon with sitting with a friend in the Timberline Lodge, which is a really lovely place that you get your resupply in Oregon. And we met a bunch of people and we were saying, oh yeah, we're doing this. And they were like, that's amazing. And we were kind of like, yeah, guess it is. So I think before I would go, oh, well, maybe it's amazing, but I don't know if I can do it. But I remember kind of maybe accepting their appreciation of what we were doing. That's the only kind of marker I can maybe get. Yeah.
What were you thinking about during the days? Did you have like a routine? So for example, on the Appalachian Trail, I wouldn't listen to anything until after 12 o'clock. And then might move on to like podcasts or music or audio books, you know, in terms of what was going on mentally. Was it a time for you to do that, to do reflection, or is it a time for you to catch up? You know, what was happening mentally?
Like you, I had a bit of I set myself some rules so that I didn't just listen to music or podcasts all day. I probably had about, I think something similar, like after midday, I could kind of let myself do what I want. And then I would just be organic on that. So some days I didn't listen to anything. And other days I would have an audiobook or a podcast from maybe 2 o'clock or so to just have some different stimulation. Because I didn't want to just also be ruminating. Like if I noticed my thoughts were maybe turning more negative and I didn't have any new thoughts to come in, then I would maybe put something on. Or if I just thought I'm not interested in my own internal dialogue anymore, I would put something on. I was generally walking alone and I made lots of friends and would maybe, walk with somebody for an hour or two here or there. But mostly I was on my own, and that was intentional because I did want to see how I am being alone with myself for that much time. But some of the time, especially in the morning, I was trying to just be present and notice the nature. So not even necessarily think anything, which is very difficult. And then the thoughts would come and then I would observe them. And so there was quite a few different things going on mentally. But yeah, some time alone, some mindfulness, some working out things, dreaming about the future, thinking about things in the past, and then getting some new stimulation learning through books and podcasts, or just having some enjoyable music or entertainment. Yeah.
There was some definite, I remember it was fantastic to follow along on your Instagram with your posts and to read. You have a beautiful way with words and an incredible way of communicating sort of, what's going on. And you definitely faced some challenges while you were out there. I think, would you like to share a little bit more about a couple of those challenging moments?
Yes, absolutely. But actually, Sarah, you've just reminded me of another answer to your original question there. When you were saying what was going on mentally, one of the things I really was intentional about doing was documenting my journey through keeping a diary. And while I was walking, I was actually experiencing whatever was coming up for me, but then thinking about what that was and how I would share that when I wrote in the evenings. So that was another practice that I found really useful and helpful. So in answer to your question there, the difficult things I experienced, I had 2 difficult health episodes. One was I developed what I later discovered was severe iron deficiency anemia. But looking back, I probably walked for a very long time with anemia, and it got progressively worse until to the extent where I was finding it really difficult to breathe, and I was walking at 1 mile an hour before I got diagnosed. And I was in the beginning of the High Sierra, just sort of the mountain area just leading up to that, when I realised I had to get treatment. And so things had got really difficult. I just wasn't moving fast enough. I was getting really breathless. I was feeling nauseous. And I was beginning to just feel pretty low in mood because of all of that. And I just couldn't work out why. I had begun to suspect possible anemia. So I'm vegetarian. I had started eating meat, but I really struggled with eating anything, to be honest, at that stage as well. So I hitchhiked from a place called Tuami Meadows, which is near Yosemite, into Mammoth Lakes, which is a really nice city to be unwell in, or a nice town to be unwell in. And I went to the emergency room and saw a doctor there, and they tested my hemoglobin, and they said I had half of the hemoglobin of a normal person, and how the hell had I been walking for so long? And it actually felt a real relief to know there was actually something specific wrong with me, rather than these very vague general symptoms that I'd been having. But what was very difficult there was the doctor didn't think it was nutritional, my anemia. She said my red blood cells were presenting in a way that wasn't representative of nutritional anemia. So she thought there was something more sinister going on. And she advised me she gave me a blood transfusion, but then advised me to fly back to Scotland and to see a specialist to work out why my iron levels were so low. So that was devastating. And I was looking into flights, but at the same time I was messaging a friend of mine who works at the London School of Tropical Medicine and is an anemia specialist. And I'm so fortunate to have Phil as my friend, and he questioned her opinion and wrote a letter for my insurers to say why he questioned it. And long story short, my travel insurance agreed for me to have a second opinion and told me how to get a second opinion, because I didn't know how to do that in America. And the second opinion, the blood test revealed that I did have nutritional anemia, and it would be rectified by already I'd had the blood transfusion, by also taking iron supplements, and that I could get back on the trail in 3 days. So that was amazing. Yeah.
That must have been an emotional roller coaster. I mean, I remember like getting quite tearful and quite emotional when I saw like the photo of Instagram of you in hospital, and then like hearing about the anemia, and I was like, oh my God, because ups and downs, and especially when you thought that you know your trip was going to be over. What was that like? I mean,
it was. I think I was really quite exhausted with having kind of walked being unwell for so long, and I think I was so relieved to know that I had anemia. Okay, right, this is a thing. You're not going crazy. You're not really unfit.
It's not in your head. It's not in your head. Yeah,
it's not in your head. And then I felt really emotional and sad, but I felt this wave of acceptance that this is what it is, and you're lucky enough to be able to fly back to a country where you can have an expert help you work out what's wrong and hopefully find a situation. So I grieved. This is all within the course of sort of 24 hours. I grieved the trail, but accepted it, because one of the things that I do in my work and in my personal life is try not to argue with reality, or not for long. So I felt sad, but also like it was all going to be okay, and the trail isn't the be all and end all. The walk for me was never just about getting from the start to the finish. I always knew it was going to be about learning about myself and how I deal with difficulty. And then actually when my friend Phil messaged and challenged the diagnosis, I had a little bit of resistance. I was like, didn't believe that things could quickly turn around and this is just going to get more complicated and it's still not going to work out. So I had a little bit of resistance to him saying, oh, actually, I disagree. Because I just didn't know what to do with that information. And I didn't know how to challenge a doctor's opinion in America, and it all just felt exhausting. And I was also at this point really worried about how much my insurance would or wouldn't cover. So there was some financial worries there. So I just turned it back on him. Like my friend he's a saint. I just said, okay, if this is the case, can you write me a professional letter explaining all of this? And then sent that to my and saying all of your qualifications that make you able to, and can you put it on a London School letterhead or whatever. And then to my insurers, I said, if you, when they said, we'll back you, I said, well, can you tell me exactly what to do? Because I don't know how to deal with this in America and all of that. So it was overwhelming, I suppose, and a bit of an emotional roller coaster. But I suppose the things that got me through it were being able to accept reality and not argue with it, and being able to ask for help, asking Phil for help, asking my insurance for help, and the help came. And just realizing you never have to do everything on your own. Or I'm lucky that I never feel like I never have to do everything on my own, and I don't have to be this strong person that can work everything out, because often I have no clue what I'm doing.
Yeah. And what was the second biggest challenge that you faced?
So then about a month later, I had finished, Yes, I'd finished going through the High Sierras, which were amazing, and that might come up later. But then I just started getting this horrendous nausea. It had come and gone in waves before, but it became stronger and stronger. And again, I didn't know what was wrong, couldn't work it out, hoped it would pass. And then it just got worse and worse. And I took some days off the trail and began to feel a little bit better, got back on trail, walked for 10 miles, and I developed this horrendous diarrhea. And messaged a doctor friend, and through going back and forth with her, decided to get off trail again, which felt absolutely devastating, because I was just aware time was passing and was getting behind, and went to a town. I went to an urgent care clinic, and basically my doctor friend in Scotland said she thought it was giardia, and I told the doctor urgent care this, and it's quite hard to diagnose, and it takes a while to get the tests back. So the doctor just asked me a bunch of questions and accepted my friend's advice or idea that it probably was giardia, and wrote me up for the prescription for the antibiotics that I needed. The doctor was amazing, really helpful, and discharged me that same day. So I just was an outpatient and got treated for giardia, and then stayed in a hotel in this town in Los Angeles for a few days, Palmdale it was called, and it got worse briefly. So I was so glad to be in a hotel, so I could just go to the bathroom, and vomited a lot and had lots of diarrhea. And then within 1.5 days, felt amazing, had an appetite back, and then got back on trail after 2 days and just felt really normal again. But I actually, although I was chronically unwell with the anemia, the giardia, when it was acute, I've never felt that unwell, I don't think, or not for a long time. So that was really horrible. But yeah, again, just so lucky to have wise friends and to have health insurance and to be able to get advice really quickly. And with hindsight, I should have got it looked at sooner. But because I just had the nausea and didn't have the diarrhea for quite a long time, I didn't realise it probably was giardia.
Yeah. I mean, Abby Lloyd from the Tough Girls Tribes got a question actually, which sort of fits in really nicely here. She said she loved following this adventure on Instagram. I know that there are a few times when you almost had to stop the trail, but she wants to know, were there any times when you actually wanted to quit the trail?
So I never. The time that I most understood why people quit the trail and considered it was when I was really feeling unwell with giardia and didn't at this point have antibiotics or a diagnosis. So I didn't make the decision I'm going to quit the trail, but I did consider it and just thought I totally get why people do this, why they come off trail and stop. That was the closest I came to that. Yeah. So it was never like I'm going to quit. But it was like, yeah, this is not fun anymore, and I don't have to continue. It became a possibility, I suppose. Yeah.
On the trail, people get trail names, and I'd love for you to share what your trail name was and how you got it, and whether you liked it or not.
Yeah. My trail name was My Shona, which comes from a song in the 70s, My Sharona. Apparently it's got a really good guitar solo, so if you don't know it, check it out. And my trail name came from, I had just finished the sort of 500 miles of walking Washington State, and I was in at Cascade Locks, which is kind of, if you know the film Wild, that's where Cheryl Strayed finishes the PCT. So I was sitting in a bar there, and a lovely friend of mine called De Jour, who's from the Isle of Skye, good representation from Scotland there. We were sitting in this bar together, and with some other folks on the trail, and it was quite a social place, lots of people coming in, and they were asking my name. And American people really struggled, or some of them really struggled to say Shona. So I say, what's your name? I say Shona. And they go, oh, hey, Shona. I say, it's Shona. And they're like, yeah, that's what I just said. I was like, no, it's... So my Scottish friend found this hilarious. And he's like, we have to get you a trail name. So he was just then riffing on the word Shona. And he was like, Sharona. And then somebody else was like, oh, my Sharona. And started singing my Sharona. And then, so I tried it for size, because other people were coming in. They were like, what's your name? And it's like, oh, my Sharona. And then a few people started singing my name. And I thought, how cool to have a trail name that when people say hello to you, they actually start singing. So it stuck, and I really like it. Yeah.
I love it. My Sharona. So you mentioned earlier that, when you start the trail southbound, there's this almost this pressure to get to the Sierra Mountains, and around the 16th of October. And Monica Aguilar says, congratulations, well done on the trail. But she wants to know, how were the Sierra Mountains? What was the reality versus the fear mongering?
Sierras were beautiful. They were absolutely beautiful. A real highlight for me for the trail, for sure. And I suppose the fear mongering, as I experienced it, was just about getting through them in time before the snow hits. I didn't feel any other fear mongering about them being dangerous in any other way. And the reality was, I was so lucky with the weather. Snow had hit me earlier, very briefly, but they were just a couple of sporadic snow days. But while I was in the Sierra, there's a little bit of lying snow from the spring, but there was no new snow while I was there. So it was really lush. Heavy going in terms of you're climbing up a pass, at least one pass a day, and coming down again. So like cardiovascularly, fitness wise, it was tough going. And they were cold because you were at high altitude. The cold was the one bit of the Sierras I did struggle with. I hate the cold. Although I'm from the Highlands of Scotland, I'm quite a softie and I've got really bad circulation. So in the mornings I would wake up sometimes and my water bottle had frozen. So centigrade wise, it was about freezing 0, or maybe slightly lower. So I did suffer a little bit, but worth it, 100% worth it, because it was just beautiful. The views you got, the sunsets, the sunrise. Yeah, just absolutely stunning. Yeah.
I know you said you sort of walked quite a bit of it sort of solo. But did you end up sort of having a little bit of a trail family, or bumping into people who you'd maybe seen earlier on?
Yeah, I did. I wouldn't say I had a trail family, because that tends to be people would sort of say where they're going to camp together and all of that. But I was, because of my sort of 2 major sickness episodes and having to come off the trail twice. People talk about a bubble, so you're kind of within a bubble of people that are before you're before them, they're before you. You bump into each other a lot. I kind of switched quite a lot of bubbles because I was kind of moving around with time that way. So I actually got to know loads of people, that because I wasn't just in one bubble the whole time. But yeah, there was a couple of, I've made a few close people I would consider close friends. And maybe to have a few names to throw in there. My friend Cherise and my friend Yatsi, and I mentioned De Jour. I'm just randomly saying people's names that I remember who were important to me. And then I made friends with a lovely couple. Bill was from Texas and Pisces was from Colombia, and they invited me to spend Thanksgiving with them in Texas, which I did. So they're just a few names of many wonderful, wonderful people that I met. Yeah.
How were the river crossings for you? Were they quite? Did you have any serious river crossings, or did that not really happen when you go southbound?
I was, again, really, really lucky. That was one of my biggest fears. People are like, oh, what's your biggest fear? Is it bears? Is it this? Is it that? And just from reading about the PCT, I was quite worried about rivers crossings. But just because as a SOBO, we didn't have a heavy snow year, I got really lucky. Yeah. I can't remember any that scared me, actually. No. There's quite a lot of bridges. When there's not bridges, I love a good river crossing. If there's stones to be jumped across, I'm on them. But again, I think northbounders had a hard time in the Sierras. But by the time I got there, most of the snow melt had sort of gone, and there wasn't new heavy water. So again, unless my memory has blanked something out, I'm not remembering any scary river crossings. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, then, milestones, 2,650 miles is a heck of a way to walk.
Yeah.
Tell us about the finish and coming to the final monument down, you're obviously still in America, but, towards Mexico.
Yeah, how was it just reaching the monument?
Yeah, just reaching it and getting
emotionally.
there. And,
yeah. That is a good question, and I find it hard to answer. I remember it was 20 miles from, I'd stayed with this beautiful couple in just in their home near, was it Mount Laguna? I've forgotten where the second last place was. And then it was 20 miles to the border. And I kind of was trying to have low expectations, because I think often it's a bit of an anticlimax, isn't it? When you come to, it was Lake Morena was the place that I stayed the night before. So I had such a beautiful evening with this lovely, lovely couple. And then I had 20 miles to walk. And I knew my friends that I mentioned earlier, Bill and Piety, I knew they were going to be finishing roughly at the same time. But I was walking on my own, and then I was going to meet them there. And it was weird. At the start of the day, I had this really high energy from enjoying the company of my friends that night and in the morning, and then just being on my own. So I was super hyper for the first 5 miles, or maybe 15 miles. And then I felt really quite flat and just, I've still actually got a good 10 miles to walk here. And oh, right. And then it was the lady that I had stayed with that night, she just then appeared and walked a few miles with me, because you had to cross this motorway. And she felt weird that I was sort of finishing on my own, so she wanted to just cheer me on, which was absolutely amazing. And then I was sort of cheery again, I guess, and less philosophical. And the light was just, as I got there, it was just a beautiful light coming towards a sort of a dusky light. And it was actually just really nice, because I'd sort of worked through not having big expectations anyway. But I did find it sad that the wall is there that's dividing, Trump's wall that's dividing Mexico and America. And it's really close to the monument, and it's got barbed wire on it. And that made me sad. I knew it was going to be there, but it just made me sad that the trail for me represents so much human kindness. Like, that was one of the things I'm taking away from the trail, and that might come out in more detail as we chat. But just the kindness that I received from Americans taking me into their homes, giving me hitchhikes, messages of support from friends and family in Britain and all over the world, and then to just end it and to see this wall. But in some ways that's sort of fuel to my fire of, that's not the last word in the story by any means. I'm not going to remember that wall as the final thing I saw, because there was much more kindness again after that. But yeah, it's just the reality, isn't it? We live in a world with both kindness and with things that divide us. And then my friends arrived about an hour later. Somebody had left beer and cider, so I had a cheeky cider to myself. And then the sun was setting, and my friends came, and we celebrated and took photographs together. And then I spent that evening with my friends and with others camped in Campo, and that was fun. It was a lovely evening. And then I went on this big road trip, so tinged with sadness, but also a really beautiful time.
You mentioned a lot of names of people that you met out on the trail, and you talked about people who opened their homes to you and who gave you rides. And one of our patrons and supporters from New Zealand, Damiana Day, she shared a post in the Tough Girl Tribe, basically saying, a big thank you to all the different trail angels out there, and what are some people's stories of different trail angels that have helped them on their own journeys. I'd love for you just to share a few of those stories and moments. I know that's difficult to do, because the kindness of strangers on these long distance through hikes is just overwhelmingly, oh god, it's gonna get me emotional. It's absolutely incredible. But a few of those magical moments.
Yeah, two. It was two that really stand out for me. One was in Oregon, in the Sisters. There's a town called Sisters, which is a beautiful name for a town, isn't it? And I went. I had really sore feet, and I'd come off trail. Kind of as a last minute decision. I came off trail to get new insoles and to get some new treatment for my blisters. And the post office in Sisters was a mile from the main town. So I'd got a hitchhike off trail, and the guy had dropped me all the way to the post office. He was a really kind man. Prayed for me. I hadn't asked him to, but it was very, very kind of him. Anyway, he prayed for my feet. And then I was in the post office, and I was just packing up something. I can't quite remember what I was doing. And this lady just said, "Oh, hello. You look really tired. Would you like me to drive you back to the town when you're finished?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, that'd be amazing. Thank you." So then she waited for me to do what I had to do in the post office, and then she drove me. And as she was driving me to town, she said, "Oh, where are you staying tonight?" And I didn't have a master plan, but I was roughly going to hitchhike kind of back out into the bush and camp before we were going on to the next place. So I just said, "Oh, I'm going to hike and then camp up." And she said, "Oh, do you know the weather's not looking good? I think you should come and stay with me and my husband." And we actually have next to our stables, she sort of lived on some kind of ranch. She said, next to our stables, we've actually got a small sort of hut that you can stay in. And I was like, "Oh, well, okay, that'd be amazing." Because she didn't seem crazy. She seemed lovely. So I thought, yeah, okay. And I had this most amazing evening sitting in, this was still sort of summertime. And so there was lots of daylight. And we were sitting in her patio, and her husband, they would be in their early 70s. We sat, and there was a hummingbird coming to the flowers, and we were drinking wine and sharing that music and travel. And I just had a lovely evening, and I stayed in this gorgeous little room that they had. And the next morning we went to a bakery, and she took me in her open top car with the top down, with music blaring, back to the trailhead. It's just amazing. She was called Sally, and we exchanged contact details. So I really hope they come and visit me. So that was amazing. It just really lifted my spirits. And then the second story that really comes to mind was more recently. I was in, where was I? I'd finished the Sierra, so I was in Southern California, and I was kind of on it. I was on a mission. I'd lost some time. I just got better from the Giardia, and I was like, right, come on, stop going off trail doing things. Keep on the trail. And I decided I'd walked 20 miles and to get to a town called Wrightwood, and it's a bit of a hike. So I was hitchhiking to get into Wrightwood, and my plan was go for an hour, get your food resupply, charge your phone for an hour in the store that you can do that, and then get back on trail and sleep on trail so you can get a long day the next day. So I was waiting to get a hitchhike, and this guy was walking his dogs, and he was just going to his car, and he said, "Oh, can I give you a ride to town?" And that'd be amazing, thank you. And then we were just chatting in the car, and he was saying how he was a musician, he was a pianist, and travelled the world, and it was just a lovely gentleman. And then as he was dropping me off, he was like, "Have you got somewhere to stay?" And I said, "No, I'm actually going to get back on trail." But it was by this time it's getting dark quite early, so I only had an hour of daylight. And he said, "Oh, you sure? It's quite cold. My wife and I would be delighted to have you. We're taking our neighbours out for Mexican food. You'll be welcome to join us." I was like, No, I'm fine. So he said, "Well, here's my number anyway, just in case." So I did my business in town, and then it was cold, it was dark, and I was like, "Shona, this guy is a total gent. He and his wife would be delightful company. Why are you not doing this?" And I kind of had this thing that I told myself at some point on the trail as well. It's not just about the miles, it's about people. And I reminded myself of this. It's about people, not just the miles. So I called him. I said, "Oh, actually, could I stay?" And he's like, "Of course. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I'll pick you up." And just had such a beautiful evening with him and his wife. We went out for this Mexican with his neighbours, and he had this big piano in his lounge. And once we got back from the dinner, he's like, "Right, what can I play for you? What music? What's your favourite classical song?" And he played Claire de Lune for me, and his wife made jewellery, and she gave me this beautiful pair of earrings that she'd made. And again, I feel like Sally and her husband, I feel like I actually, although it was only a kind of brief friendship, I feel like I've made friends with people that I will stay in touch with. And again, this is a couple that do like to travel, so they've said they like to come to Scotland to meet me. But again, that for me, it was just brought home how easy it is for me to get like focused on making miles and of meeting goals. And actually, it's people that you will remember over vistas and how many miles you did in a day. So yeah, there are many stories like that, but they're two that really are wedged in my brain.
I love that, and I hope they come and visit you in Scotland.
I do too.
So it's been a couple of weeks now since you're back, and I'd love for you to know, like, reflecting back, is there anything that you would have done differently, knowing what you know now, having gone through that experience? Would you have changed any of the planning? Would you have done your resupply? Is there any kit or gear or anything that you wish you'd had, or anything that you would change out?
Yeah, in terms of the kit, the gear, I was really happy with everything, actually. I don't think I would change anything with my gear. I was a little bit cold, like I was saying, for a few days in the Sierra, but for the amount of time it was, and the weight the weight penalty, the only thing maybe I bought some rab mittens after the Sierra, and I still used them loads after, so I wish I had better gloves. Actually, that might have been the one thing I'd have changed. In terms of the other thing I would change would be, I got severe iron deficiency anemia because I wasn't eating enough iron. And I think even if I wasn't a vegetarian, I just really struggled with eating. And in Northern California, the heat and just something going with maybe just disgust at eating the same things all the time. I don't really know, but I just couldn't eat for a while. So I think even if I wasn't vegetarian, I'd have got it. So I now, if I'm doing another long distance hike, I will always take iron supplements. That's been a big learning for me. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything I'd have changed. Maybe just if I get sick, I would seek healthcare quicker. I would trust that I have travel insurance and that will cover getting care. And maybe just what I'd said there about accepting hospitality and accepting offers of help. I think I did do that pretty well, but I would be really clear of that if I'm doing another hike. If anyone says, do you want to come stay in my house if they don't seem crazy? Yes. But I think I generally did when people did offer me kindness. I generally did. But that kind of mantra of people over miles kind of thing. Yeah.
Can I ask you about your shoes? Because I think you bought four pairs of trainers.
That is another thing I would do differently, Sarah. You're right.
Tell us about the shoes.
The shoes. Yeah. So I got a really good deal from an amazing shop in Inverness on the shoes that everyone seemed to be wearing on the trail, Altras. I've forgotten the name. Do you remember the name of the make?
But I remember the shop because I've been in the shop with you, so I know how amazing they are.
Yeah. And if people Google Altras, anyway, they'll get the shoe. But anyway, yeah, so it's a 0 drop shoe. And I wore it for 3 months. So I wasn't like an idiot just getting these shoes and not trying them out. I wore them for 3 months in Scotland and did trail running with them and things like that. And I loved them. Had no problems, no issues at all. But yeah, throughout Washington, I had severe foot problems pretty much from the start. Or bad, not severe, but reasonably bad foot problems. Plantar fasciitis I had before, begun to get that again. Just did not feel happy in my feet at all. Was mixing up insoles, trying everything. And then in Ashland in Oregon, I just gave up on the shoes and tried Socrates. So, am I saying that right? Socrates, I think they are. French make of shoes, which are not a 0 drop, a much more supportive shoe. And I only needed 2 of them to last me the whole trail, the rest of the whole trail. And one pair are still in good nick. So they were the right shoe for me. And when I was sort of getting advice in shoe shops after I decided the Altras didn't work, it was just some people were just saying, like, with heavy loading. Although I had a couple of times gone out in the Scottish hills with the Altras with my pack, it hadn't been enough, I suppose, to give them a shot, and the pack maybe hadn't been heavy enough. So that was a big bit of learning. Don't stock up your shoes before you go. Like, yeah, just see what's working for you on trail and then buy your shoes on trail. And actually, that's also reminded me of another thing I would change up. I read all of these blogs saying don't send too much food ahead of yourself. Like in Washington, you kind of had to because the resupply was more difficult, but Oregon, there were more options. But I would send boxes to myself with the same porridge and the same tuna fish things that I'd bought, and lots of Cliff Bars that I just eventually just could not face, and trail mix that I could not face. So I was just giving away my food to everybody. Everyone thought I was great, but I had to still buy some of the food, or just stopped eating a lot of food. So I would be, not be buying as much food in advance. I would change that.
Yeah. I mean, actually, that's sort of quite a nice segue. So Alison Trigell says, from awesome member of Tough Girl Tribe, says, congratulations to Shona. Looking forward to the podcast. She'd love to know more about the funding. How much cash would you need for an adventure like this? And how did you raise the funds? So what were you working with a specific budget? Did you have like an emergency fund that you could dip into? Did you stick to your budget? Do you know how much you spent?
So one of the things one of my projects to do, I want to go through and work all of that out. I haven't done that yet. So what I did was, I've got a savings account, so I had some savings that basically funded the trip. But I Airbnb'd my house while I was away, so I'm lucky I own my own home, and I had people in that, and my friend managed that for me, and I paid her for that. But that hopefully was most of my spending money. Again, I still have to do those calculations, and once I've done that, if you want to, I'm going to put it in a blog anyway, so I can share that with you to share on the Tough Girl group. But yeah, so basically it was funded by my savings and by Airbnb my house while I was away. And I think I probably lived on about £5,000 while I was away. But like I say, I have to check that. And the other thing was kits-wise. Some friends helped me who work within the industry to get some quite good discounts on kits. And the final component was I never asked anybody for money at all. The money I was fundraising, but while I was there, so that was the only ask I had, and it was a very soft, non-pushy ask. But while I was on trail and before I went, a couple of friends said, like, I really want to help you. Is there something I can buy for you? So somebody bought me my leggings, which were amazing. They've lasted me all of this time. And somebody bought my emergency beacon. I didn't have one of the ones on contract. I just had one that if you press it, someone comes and gets you. That's it. So I couldn't SMS or anything. So I had that. And somebody bought my battery charger thing. And then when I was on trail, a couple of people got in touch and said, I want to pay for a hotel room when I was having a hard time. So 3 people actually got in touch and paid for hotel rooms or tiny house Airbnb while I was out there, which was amazing. And I just decided, actually, if people want to help, it's okay to say, yes, thank you. That's really kind. And it's not easy sometimes, is it, when you're very independent and people, it's their hard-earned cash that they're giving to you. But I thought, well, they've offered and it really helped me. So, yeah. So that does that answer the question on the funding?
Absolutely. And because I think I've heard it's around like about $1,000 per month, so that would actually work out too, because you were out there for about 5 months or so. So
exactly,
it is.
But I do want to crunch those numbers. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to write a blog and share that. So definitely that will be more specific.
And you talked about your soft asking as well, because you were actually raising money for a charity, which is super incredible. Would you like just to share a little bit about how much you raised and the charity and how that went?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my home city of Inverness, there is a charity called Mikeys Line, and it's a mental health emergency. Initially, it was a emergency text line, and more recently, they've also opened up an emergency sort of drop-in centre for people with sort of mental health crisis. So that's called Mikeys Line, named after a young man called Mikey who took his own life, and any life taken is too much. So it's just a really important cause. And so on my business, I kind of got my Instagram. It's kind of both personal and business. And my Facebook, I've got a Facebook page that's personal and business. So on those, I didn't really ask at all for funds. It was just on my personal Facebook page. I was sharing less of my story, but I was sometimes just posting some pictures there and sharing a little bit. And there I just updated people on how much we raised and thanked people and asked if anyone wanted to give. So mostly just through that. And as of today, £6,000 we've raised. My target was 4,000, and I thought that was going to be difficult. So absolutely blown away by people's kindness. That kind of feels like the theme song for my trek, really, is overwhelmed by people's kindness. Yeah.
No, absolutely amazing. What I'll do is I'll make sure that I put the links to the charity, to your Facebook page, to your Instagram page, to your website, to your blogs. People can follow along.
Thank you so much.
Zoe Langley-Wathen, she had a few different questions. Sorry, Zoe from the Tough Girl Tribe. A few different questions, but we've discussed quite a few of them. But one of them is, when's the book coming out? Will you be writing a book?
I don't know is the honest answer to both questions. And it's interesting, on trail, like I was doing this daily diary, and I loved keeping that diary, and I loved just how people were so kind in their responses to it. And initially people were saying, oh yeah, when's your book coming out? I want to read it. And I was like, oh, ha, 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 yeah. And then at some point I've kind of thought, oh, maybe I could write a book. So I'm not saying I am going to write a book. And part of me was like, well, I'd like to wait till I'm a better writer. Let's wait for a few years and write more, because I do love writing, but I feel like my vocabulary isn't as good as it could be and all of those things. But just more recently I was thinking, well, I guess I've kind of got a lot of content already written. And a friend of mine has had a book published recently about, I forgot what it's called, but it's about breast cancer and her mum dying and being in the Monroes and all of that. So I'm going to meet her for a coffee just to find out more about her story of getting published. So I'm open to the idea if it could work. But I kind of just believe seeing where your energy is, pushing some doors and seeing if it's the right time and if things will move my way, or if it feels like the doors are all pretty tough right now, it's not quite the right season. But either way, I'm going to keep writing because I absolutely love writing, and just sort of see what happens.
Yeah. Do you think there's another long distance trail in you?
There could be. I don't know. Yeah, really don't know. Like at times, it's not been that long since I've finished, but I guess I've had enough time to begin to think things. And at times I've been like, oh, wow, like the Continental Divide seems really exciting, maybe a little bit harder, but like kind of doable, and almost like I've got more of a sense of what that would involve. So why don't I just whack one out quite soon? And then another part of me is, I feel like my appreciation of time has changed a bit from being on the trail, in that I've got better, but I definitely used to live life in a hurry, kind of got to do all the things all the time and hurry up and get it done because you don't have much time left on the planet, kind of thing, or you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow in terms of your health. But I also feel like I've been away for 5 months, and on the trail that felt like quite a long time. But since coming back, it feels like I've been away for a few weeks. So I just feel like time doesn't have to be this rushy thing, and I don't have to know yet if it's I don't know yet if it's the right thing to do another trail next year or in the next 5 years or whatever. But I feel like I have the tools in terms of being clear on my values and being somebody that works on her own limiting thoughts that I'll know when I know, if that makes any sense. So I'm being a bit coy, am I there, Sarah? But the genuine answer is I don't know. I'm not hiding something here. I feel open to it, and I absolutely loved the PCT, and at times I absolutely hated it. I thought, why the hell am I doing this? You know, it's never one thing or the other, is it? It's and I'm happy to just continue to share that process, and I am right now continuing my online diary, not as regularly because it's maybe less interesting for people, but sharing what it's like to have completed the trail and to be living with this transition and to be living with the uncertainty of not quite knowing what's going to come up from that adventure.
Do you feel as though it's been life-changing for you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's quite a I suppose you could argue that any significant encounter is life-changing, and I think lots of conversations I had on the trail were life-changing, and I just think lots of things are life-changing all the time, but yeah, that's definitely been one of those things in my life. Yeah.
I mean, because one of the things that a lot of people talk about is like the adventure blues, you know, this you know, this is something that you've dreamed about. You've spent a huge amount of time like planning, and then you've gone out there and you've you've achieved this phenomenal achievement. You know, not many people go out and you know, spend that length of time out there in the woods, walking on the Pacific Crest Trail, you know, accomplishing a massive physical and mental challenge. And then you are now back, you know, back in Inverness and probably, you know, back in your own bed and nice and warm and getting back into work and doing your coaching. And have you had any adventure blues yet, or do you think it's hit yet, or not right yet hit?
It's not yet hit. No, I don't think it has. So after finishing the trail, I then had a bit of time traveling with friends I'd met on the trail and spending Thanksgiving with them in Texas. And then I used to live in London, so I then spent nearly a week in London seeing friends, and that was really fun. So it felt like the holidays continued. And I only came home last Tuesday night. So it's not even a week yet since I've been back in the Highlands. And then it's been really lovely just catching up with people. And I actually had a bothy adventure at the weekend for my friend's birthday, and we did biking and some mountaineering and staying in a freezing bothy. So there's just been like a ton going on. So I think you're right. You hit the nail on the head that it hasn't sunk in yet.
By the way, I'm hoping it won't sink in, because I'd love for you to get through without having like any adventure blues, but yeah, it'll be interesting. Sorry, I cut you off.
I don't know. Also, Sarah, there was a really interesting article that I shared somewhere recently. I think I just shared it in the context of a post that I wrote about maybe like a shadow that I'd felt one morning since the first morning I woke up in my own bed. I just came felt like a shadow kind of thing. And there's a research article that's just come out. And it's like, when I'm saying research, I think the lady would say it's sort of very small scale research. It was a sample size of 20 people who hiked the PCT. I think I'm getting this right. I haven't got it in front of me, so forget. I don't even remember the author's name, but I can again send you the link to it. But she interviewed a small number of people who'd finished the PCT this year on the question of adventure blues. And her kind of thesis from those interviews was, it's what people grieve isn't just the trail, it's actually their identity, their sort of concept of self, or their identity in relation to the trail, the sort of self that they've discovered. And I thought that's such an interesting thing. And especially if you feel like you're a very different person on the trail, and then you're kind of going back to a life where you're maybe feeling like you're more constrained by the social norms, and you're not maybe as able to be that self that you met on the trail. And I feel like I'm maybe quite lucky that maybe I'm a wee bit older, and that I've done a lot of work through counselling and life coaching, that I don't feel, if I use the term my Shona for my trail self and Shona for my own self, I don't feel like Shona and my Shona were different people. But maybe my Shona was a wee bit more courageous and adventurous. So I'm hoping that I will carry those into my new normal. But I'm also hoping that the adventure blues won't hit quite so much, because I don't feel there's a big gap between those two people. And I'm so lucky, like my life is really interesting. Even if I don't go on another big hike next year, I will be in the Scottish mountains a lot. And I do work that's hugely varied and work that I love. And there's lots of quite exciting things in my life anyway. But all of that, pride comes before a fall. So yeah, I'm not in any way saying that it won't be difficult, and all of that as well.
Shona, what advice would you have for other women who are thinking, I want to do something like you. I want to be more courageous. I want to grab that courage and just do something epic. What advice would you have for those women? You know, what have you learned from this experience?
Yeah, I guess it's getting really clear. What is it you want to do? Why do you want to do that? So you can really, when it's difficult, if like say your planning process is difficult, or you begin to doubt yourself, if you're really clear about what you want to do and why, that kind of becomes an anchor for you that you can come back to when the storms, because I think sometimes the hardest bit is getting there, isn't it? Sometimes the actual doing it isn't that bad, is it? It's all the things that come in our way, that be that self-doubt, be that raising the money, be that work constraints, whatever. So getting really clear on your anchor as to why you're doing it. and then we're going through the logistics and all of that. And then I think the biggest thing that will often stop us is our own internal dialogues rather than external circumstances. So our thoughts, the stories we're telling ourselves. So to notice how quickly, maybe the example that I gave about the book, when people said at first when I was sharing my journal, people saying, "Well, you're going to write your book?" I was like, no, I couldn't do that. That was, I think my no now was actually fear. And my own stories about I'm not good enough writer and those sort of things. So I think when people often we're planning a big adventure, our fear, or I'm not outdoorsy enough, or I'm whatever our story is, I'm not enough in some variant comes along, we can realize that's just a thought. It doesn't have to, I can tell another story. So really catching yourself in your own storytelling and realizing when it's not actually true, it's just an opinion, and that you could have another opinion, and then going back to that anchor of this is why I want to do it. This is what I want to do. And then, lots of other things I suppose I could say, but listening, people have gleaned lots of other wisdom from listening to your podcast and following other inspiring women. Like there's just no end on Tough Girl podcast of inspiring women doing much more gnarly things than I've done. And I think surrounding yourself, if you haven't got people in your life that are inspiring you and doing things that are maybe more scary than you've done already, just listen to them on podcasts. They don't have to be your friends. That you can just, if you're surrounded by naysayers or people who are very similar to you, listening to a bunch of podcasts, reading books, being inspired on a daily basis, and then that will help you change your story if you've maybe got a bit of a negative story. Quite a lot of words there. I hope I didn't say too much.
No, I love it. I love hearing you speak. I love how you've shared your journey. And Shona, I'd love for you to also just share how people can connect with you, find out more about your PCT, find out more about working with you, find out more about connecting.
Yeah, so I have a website where my blog lives. So basically my Instagram is Walk Wild Coach, and that's like my daily diary off the trail and life beyond. And the content on that is also on my blog. So you can read that as a more condensed, like 7 diary entries together rather than going through each Insta post. So it depends how you like to consume. And then also my Shona Macpherson coaching is my Facebook page, but the 3 of them are very similar content, but the actual website is the one where it tells you more about the actual offers that I'm running. I would so in terms of I've got a retreat coming up in May. If you live in Inverness, which is maybe a small sample of your podcast, I'm doing a Goals with Heart workshop in January, and then I have a work with a mountain guide in May and June running treks for wellbeing. So website Shona Macpherson coaching is the Facebook, and then Walk Wild Coach is Instagram. I wish they all had the same name, but sorry, they don't.
That's okay. They don't have to have the same name. But Shona, a massive thank you for coming back on the Tough Girl Podcast Extra to share more about your incredible challenge. I'll make sure I put all of the links to everything that you've talked about, and also the link to our first podcast where people can find out more about sort of your early life and the planning and preparation that went in, and what your thoughts were like before heading off on the challenge. So I think it's a really complimentary episode to listen to as well as this episode. But thank you so much for sharing. I really do appreciate it. You've been an incredible inspiration, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed reading your Instagram posts and reading the words that you've written. I know so many other people as well, so thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. It's been lovely to speak.
Hi, how you doing? I hope you are well. So massive thank you to Shona for coming back on the Tough Girl Podcast Extra to share more about her journey on the Pacific Crest Trail. What an adventure, what a challenge. I know for me it is definitely on my bucket list and something that I would love to do at some point. If you haven't listened to the first episode with Shona, please do go back and take a listen to that. All of the links and everything that we've talked about is available at toughgirlchallenges.com. If you go to the website, that's almost like the central hub, which is where you can find more information out about our previous guests that we've had on and also future guests. Let me just give you a little heads up about one of our future guests who's coming on the 31st of December. We're going to be catching up with Yolanda Holder, who is a professional ultra marathon walker. In 2019, at the 6 Days in the Dome in Milwaukee, she set a world and American age group record, which was 413 miles. and that was in the age category 60 to 64. In 2019, Yolanda also became the first African-American woman and second African-American to earn a U.S. race walk centurion, and the oldest person at 61 years young to race walk 100 miles in under 24 hours. So that's a really, really fascinating episode to listen to, and that's coming out on the 31st of December at 7 a.m. UK time. I'm going to be doing a final reflections episode, and that'll be coming out on Thursday, the 2nd of January. That's going to be focused on the final 6 months of 2019. I'm going to be talking about the Camino, the Lycian Way. I'm going to be giving updates and plans for 2020 for Tough Girl Challenges and myself as well. You may have recently been watching on my Instagram stories that I did the Boxing Day dip, which was absolutely freezing. My poor little toes took ages to get their circulation back, but there is going to be a short vlog coming out. So there are new vlogs going to be coming out, especially on the Lycian Way. That's going to be coming out at the beginning of the year. So make sure you go and check out Tough Girl Challenges YouTube channel as well. I always think the days in between sort of Christmas and New Year are quite sort of strange. It's almost like you're in limbo. You finish this, big Christmassy celebration, and then you're almost waiting for the new year to start. So there's going to be, if you're a member of Tough Girl Tribe, there's going to be a couple of things happening in that limbo time period. There's going to be an opportunity for you to reflect on your 2019, what went well, what were you happy about, what were you pleased about, what lessons have you learned from this year, and be able to share that with the other members of the Tough Girl Tribe. I'm also going to be looking for two words from you about how you're going to describe your 2020. Obviously, they've got to be positive and personal to you. There's going to be a big welcome to new members of the Tough Girl Tribe, the newest patrons and supporters who are joining us to help start 2020 in a way. We're also going to be doing some work on goals for 2020. There's going to be information on making your goals smart, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. And there's also going to be an opportunity for members of the Tough Girl Tribe to ask me questions about the Tough Girl podcast, the Tough Girl vlog, the Tough Girl Tribe, Tough Girl Challenges, basically anything you want me to talk about in the final reflections episode, which will be coming out on the 2nd of January. Now, I do love talking, obviously, but I'm going to try and keep it to a minimum. But I just want to say a massive thank you for all your love and support over the past 12 months. It's been absolutely incredible. There has been a lot going on behind the scenes, which I cannot wait to share with you. So they'll be coming out in the final reflections episode. But massive thank you to all the patrons. If you want to support the Tough Girl podcast, then please do go check out not Tough Girl Challenges. We check that out anyway. But please do go check out Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. And you can sign up and support the work I'm doing to increase the amount of female role models in the media. All right, take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.